Rise up, the Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up, rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. The crew is back, and now it's time to rise up. The Dukes are back, and now it's time to rise up. Rise up.
And we're back with another special edition of the D's on Fire podcast.
Special.
I mean, we went from not even doing it once a week to now doing it every day with recordings. But this is the time. Duquesne postseason play for both teams. You're about to be heading over to Omaha to cover the NCAA tournament. How excited are you?
I still feel like I'm working in beer and wine right now. I had to watch the entire game composed at beer and wine, but I mean, it was definitely interesting having to contain everything, but I'm very used to containing everything within the scope and scheme of my own job. But I mean, I always thought that this was a possibility, probably more than most people. Just seeing the talent develop, we've had conversations throughout the season, and you can attest. I told anybody that listened in January at 0-5 that this was still his most talented team. They just had to cross the finish line, and really all it took was the mentality of just, you better not let us get one, because once we get one, we're going to go on a roll. And that's exactly what happened. And here they are in the NCAA tournament, probably one of the hottest teams in the entire country, having won the last 8 contests. And really, for me, what was the key towards that? I really think, I mean, well, Keith with his best coaching job as a Duquesne Duke, but I think the decision to stay on the road in between the Mason and VCU game was what won Duquesne the Atlantic 10 championship. Bar none.
So you do think where they ended up seeding wise played a big factor in their journey?
I think on the surface, it might have looked like it wasn't the best opportunity for Duquesne, but I think you also have a Duquesne team that is at least outwardly been considered the redheaded stepchild of Dayton. Keith said it himself within his first couple of seasons with the program. We're just a bunch of kids that Dayton doesn't want. And this time of year, that's really dangerous. I mean, for goodness sake, the Dayton SID gave Duquesne plenty of bulletin board material when he decided to publish on the up next, pending the result, Dayton will await its fate in either the Atlantic 10 championship semifinals or to see if their name gets called during selection Sunday, but instead decided to automatically give Dayton the win over Duquesne. Probably a typo, but stupid nonetheless. And this is a Duquesne team that had finally put it all together, and it's a Dayton team that hadn't had that opportunity to play. And you saw all those teams, all those top 4 seeds in the quarterfinals lose, and you always have that rest versus rust, and you can play the coach and complain that you've only had 23 minutes to shoot on these rims, but it's on you to make the adjustment. And Duquesne winning the way it did against St. Louis, of course, as we talked about, and as you so gracefully put my name under the Port Authority or Pittsburgh Rapid Transit bus line of saying that Travis Ford ended Jim Ferry's career. Now now Keith Dambrot does the same to Ford. I mean, it was a little bit of just one of those things. It just felt like the wildest Uber ride of all time, with a GPS in typical New York fashion bouncing from building to building, with each Duke bouncing from ball to ball and shot to shot and finding a way at the end of it. But on the surface, did this look like the easiest bracket? No. But since when has Duquesne loved it being easy? I mean, these are kids that feast on being underrated and feast on people giving up. And the biggest mistake the conference made was when they were 0-5, they wrote Duquesne off. They were ready to not only hand Keith Dambrot his walking papers, but they might have handed Keith Dambrot a couple of other things on the way out. But there were questions about the rotation. There were questions if Keith Dambrot still had it. There was questions on how far connection was going to get this team. And here we are, NCAA tournament verge here, and I think everybody has their answers.
Yeah, I was one of the people that said the results didn't matter, but they just needed to find that rotation, find that identity, and find a way to win games, because the late game scenarios was really what was killing them during that 0-5 start to conference play. I mean, UMass was a blowout, but Dayton they had a lead in the second half. It faded away. St. Joe's, that tight game. Richmond, another tight game. Loyola Chicago was a relatively tight game too. So Dambrot and the players put it best. They learned how to win, and now that they've learned how to win, they're not going to forget it anytime soon, which does make them dangerous. I mean, Alec and I discussed it in yesterday's pod, which seems like forever ago at this point, with how crazy that experience has been. That this team has all the makings to be a dangerous NCAA tournament team. They have all the characteristics that a stereotypical coach would want out of the guys. They hustle. They're willing to sacrifice themselves for the cause. They're defense first oriented. They can make those clutch free throws, which every player has. David Dixon has made clutch free throws when he's shooting 60% or so from the field or from the free throw line. Fousseyni Drame has hit some clutch free throws. The percentages don't matter. Once it's game winning time, these guys hit them.
Well, sure. And I think it harkens back to something Keith Dambrot has said so many times. It's the energy generated behaviors. It's the straw that stirs the drink. And it hasn't necessarily been the prettiest road. It might have taken until this 8-game winning streak to find the rotation, but it doesn't matter about finding it. What matters is playing your best basketball in March. And bar none, I mean, now granted, Duquesne made barely more shots from the field than you or I did in the second half of that game, Nick. And we didn't play. But that's not what matters. What matters is that they built that lead in the first half. They played it defensively well. Even when VC was shutting them down, they did not get frustrated and let the defense, which has been their bread and butter, their mantra for getting to this point, deter them from denying what was theirs, what was Ray Goss's, what was the Duquesne communities, what was Dave Saba's, which Dave's making the trip to Omaha, which is very, very nice to see. I guess I'll have to see Stone Cold Saba 316 one last time here, but more so, I mean, and Saba and Keith potentially walking out together or potentially enjoying the Cinderella run together. Just that, either one, just you can't write that stuff. This whole thing has been special. Don Marico in heaven watching this. Some of the Duquesne fans that unfortunately could not make it and are watching from heaven that have waited for a winner, watching and willing that Zeb Jackson 3-pointer off the glass, not in the basket, but onto the Barclays Center floor harmlessly. Maybe they were playing a little bit of a practical joke with the streamers and the confetti in the second half, but it doesn't matter. I mean, what matters is that Duquesne has figured it out. They're dangerous because they believe. They're dangerous because they're connected. They're dangerous because even when things don't go their way, they found a way to win. They're dangerous because they play with the desperation that makes opponents nervous. They're dangerous because when an opponent sees Duquesne, it's not easy win. This is the team that we don't want to play this time of year. And when you put all of that together at this time of year, that is why Duquesne is such a potent weapon.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure every opposing coach, when they lose in the A10 tournament or March Madness, just gives it up for the other team who beat them, basically. But it really felt like they were sincere in saying that. I mean, credit to Duquesne, they outplayed us. That was the consistent tone that was set by every coach of the team that they beat, whether it be Coach Ford from St. Louis, Grant from Dayton, Schmidt from Bonnie's. Admittedly, I didn't pay attention to what Odom said in the VCU press conference. I was too focused on Duquesne celebrations during that.
That's my job anyway, so it's okay. I mean, that's the thing too, especially, I mean, you start with St. Louis. I mean, we all know that what the situation was in St. Louis with that coaching situation. And I wish the best to Travis Ford. I get along very well with Travis, and hopefully with whatever's next, maybe I'll see him on a golf course. But regardless of that, just personally, I know he rubbed some people the wrong way, but I personally was a Travis fan. So, I mean, of course, there's the intrigue of Charles Thomas being on that staff and him departing Duquesne for reasons, but obviously wish the best to him and that entire SLU staff as they all look to find their next step and find their next. In terms of Dayton, I mean, this I'm excited for Dayton. I mean, look, this is a Dayton team that a couple of years ago was poised to make history as a #1 seed. This was the Final Four year. This was the Cinderella story, and the pandemic took it all away. So, you know what? Good on for Dayton for getting into the NCAA tournament. I know it's been a rough time for Anthony Grant with some family tragedy that he's had to endure in the recent years, and he was a man where Dayton fans were saying it's time to step aside. The game has passed you by. It's time to retire. The game has passed you by. And what a nice fu that is to those loud fan base. I mean, you've seen the Duquesne discussion boards. People were having the same conversations with Keith Dambrot. Now, I mean, granted, the SLU transfer portal is going to be active. We've seen the St. Bonaventure transfer portal is already incredibly active. That's unfortunately what the NIL giveth and taketh away. And that's why, really, when you go back to everything, well, I mean, again, Schmidt's just a genius in what he does, but Dambrot read him like a book 3 times. And when was the last time you could say Duquesne read St. Bonaventure like a book 3 separate times in the same season? Hell, they might have had it 3 times in the last 15 meetings. I mean, that's just about how Duquesne's played against Bonaventure, and Bonafans go to Duquesne to get drunk and to guarantee a win, and that's just was not the case this year, except for the guy that one fan that got kicked out of that game. But that's another story for another game. Bonafans love their beer, bless them. But regardless of that, I mean, VCU, I mean, there was the question mark on that one too. I mean, again, the narrative with Dayton, these are the players that Dayton didn't want. With Bonaventure, this is the team third time. It's never the charm the third time. This is the team that's always had our number. Another win. VCU, storied program. They're used to being an NCAA tournament. What about Shulga? What about Shulga? Shulga was the first team guy, and when Jimmy Clark walks into Keith Dambrot and says, "I want Shulga," I mean, if that doesn't take the brass balls, if that doesn't get your attention right there, these players were up for this game. There was nothing had to be said. I mean, it was the Cody Rhodes. It was to finish the story. I mean, this whole thing, you just can't write a better story. If Disney wants the rights, then God bless them. I mean, I don't know who would play Keith Dambrot in the movie, but I mean, that would be a fascinating topic in and of itself. But regardless of that, I mean, the fairy tale, if this is a fairy tale, I mean, Duquesne fans never want to be woken up again. I mean, this has been such special stuff. And yeah, VCU there's a lot of reason, and good for VCU for making the NIT as well. So a lot to be excited about there. But for right now, I mean, this shows the program. And my first prevailing thought when the buzzers went to 0 was that 6-24 season was so necessary, and it hurt for a lot of Duquesne fans. I understand that. I hear you, but Keith Dambrot needed to take back control of this program in every sense. He had lost control of the program. There were a lot of attitudes. There was a lot of me. Now, some of that me was great team play, but it was more individualistic within the team. And that's not a knock on any of those players. That's just what the situation felt. There were just too many cooks in the kitchen, and Keith Dambrot needed to be the only cook in the kitchen. But it didn't work. Again, 6-win season. That's very, very unheard of. That's not like Keith Dambrot, but immediately he accepted that it was what it was, that he overcorrected. He got guys that were maybe a little bit too nice and not enough able to get it done on the court. While everybody else asked if the game had passed Keith by, Dave Harper, Ken Gormley, that board of trustees, they stuck with that investment that they made, and tenfold they've been rewarded. A guy like Austin Rotroff staying the course is why this past weekend happened. Guys like Andy Barba, who haven't necessarily had their time on the court, but have been glue guys that have stuck with this team, are why this weekend happened. Trey Williams gave up his body multiple times. He might not be playing. He probably isn't playing the rest of the season. Without Trey Williams, this does not happen. Without those guys, without that continuity, without that culture, do you get a Day-Day Grant? Is Jimmy Clark as excited and motivated to finish the story and find kindred spirits? All of the pieces of the puzzle had to come together. And it took that 6-24 to start struggling to put pieces together to understand this is exactly what we need to be as a basketball team. We need to value the basketball. We need to work it from the inside out to find shots. We need to assist the basketball, and we need to do it at the defensive end. And learning all of those things in that 6-win season is what it took. As humiliating for Duquesne fans as it was, that season was essential for what happened these last few games to happen.
Yeah. And speaking of essential, I think it's essential that we do touch on. I know you have the article coming out still, so we won't touch on everything with Coach Dambrot retiring, but it's essential that we talk about it. I put on Twitter, I can't go 24 hours without crying again. I thought I was good until at least Thursday, but they come back, they get back in around like 4 a.m. and they still hold the noon press conference for him to announce that he is officially stepping down after this run ends, which is even more motivation, which the players don't need any more motivation, and they probably already knew before we did that he was stepping down, but every game now is they're playing for not just their careers, but Coach Dambrot's careers. And in the post game presser, where Day and Trey both told them that they love him, you can just feel that that's kind of the vibe of the entire locker room. Everybody's playing for everybody. It truly is a family where they're all playing for one another, including the coach.
I mean, should I let the cat out of the bag and say that I've known this for quite a while?
Yeah, you can.
I've known this for quite a while.
I kept a secret. I kept it under wraps.
Yeah, I've known this for quite some time. And the signs were there. I mean, I think Duquesne fans knew that this wasn't a forever thing, and the contract ended after this season. And I mean, from a Duquesne perspective, it's impossible not to connect the dots, right? I mean, there was no talk of an extension. I mean, that in and of itself. And then when you hear the unfortunate news about the challenges that Donna's his wife has been dealing with that have been encompassing so much time, and that alone takes up so much energy. And then on top of it, to have the energy that he does to run these practices, to be at these games, even that Rhode Island game, which he got the permission and Donna wanted him to leave with the team, and he did not want to do that. He wanted to be by her side. This season, I think, has put a lot into perspective for him. He's about to become a grandfather here pretty soon, so that itself is very, very special. And just it's nice to see that addition to the Dambrot family through all of these the peaks and valleys that this season has been on and off the court. And I think in his heart of hearts, Keith knew what he was going to do, but I think realizing there was more than basketball can be difficult, and I think he saw it for himself and understanding that the basketball court isn't where he needs to be, and he doesn't want to miss it as much anymore, and his ability to be there. Now, I don't know if Donna's going to want him around that much if he's saying he doesn't have any hobbies. That could be interesting, but I mean, he's got all of the time in the world to figure it out. Maybe you'll see him at a batting cage near you. But jokes aside, I mean, the relationship that Keith has had with me has been special. I won't go into it too much here out of respect for the column, but I mean, deservedly on top. And if fans who weren't aware of what Keith has done to transform this program, now everybody knows it, and they don't have a choice but to respect it. And if he's not going to do it, screw it, I will. Drew Joyce needs to be the next coach of the Duquesne Dukes.
Yeah,
Whether it's happened already, whether it's not happened already, whether any other name is being considered, and I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's some other names in and around that have or will be considered, but you have to keep the LeBron James connection. You have to keep the continuity of this team. You have to keep the NIL dollars up. You have to continue this momentum that you've obtained and keep it relevant. And Drew has been given every opportunity to succeed in these couple of years, and it's only right to see if he is the right man for the job. When he left Cleveland State, when he went over from his past job, he had auditioned to be the coach and they didn't give it to him. Make them pay for that mistake. Drew Joyce III is Duquesne basketball. Keith Dambrot has been an institution for Duquesne basketball for these last several years, and it is only right if Keith is campaigning for him or at least kissing the idea, then it is on Dave Harper and that administration to make the right call and to make the right decision. And I have And for someone that's hemmed and hawed about things and wavered and played the neutral card, there's nothing neutral about this. There is only one correct hire. It is abundantly clear.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to get his name right. I think Spencer Thomas, who is a current Duquesne student and works with Duquesne student media, uh, put a quick article out after the presser. It seemed like Dambrot talked to him after the press conference ended, and it seemed like he was a little more adamant that Drew Joyce should be the choice. So
Yeah, I mean, he has to behave when the grown-ups are at the dinner table, right? I mean, there's only so much, and I think when Dave Harper said it matter-of-factly that this day was about Keith, it is, but either they're hiding it, which is very possible, or, I mean, everybody in that room looked during that pause when Keith said the next coach, and that pause was, make no mistakes about it, as someone who was not in the press conference but has played a hand or two of poker, that was the most obvious tell in the room. Keith campaigned without having to say a campaign. I mean, there was no check raise needed. Keith threw all of his chips in the middle without touching his chips. I mean, let's not hide this at all. The continuity of having Drew back, the continuity of potentially the important aspect that's being missed of keeping and retaining as much, if not that entire coaching staff, as humanly possible is essential. Every person within that staff has fulfilled a role. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's offense or defense. It matters if they're keeping guys fresh, if they're keeping guys motivated. In a time where there's so many distractions and NILs on the rise and transfer, I mean, we already have 450 names in the portal and it just opened up. I mean, it's nuts. It's at an all-time high. So retention is so important, and your best chance of keeping this going is with Drew Joyce III.
Yeah. I mean, there's no debate in my mind, Alec, and I also talked about that on the last pod where we said the connection with LeBron's only going to get stronger when it comes to recruiting, because as the kids continue to be younger and younger, they look more to LeBron as a mythical figure, because they're getting further and further away from how old he is and how dominant he's been for so long. So that connection is only going to be more important as the years go on. As far as Drew and who he seems to be, because I don't actually have any personal interaction. I'm just a fan watching from far away. It does seem like he connects with these guys on a very different level. It does seem like he's played an integral role, especially on the defensive end, from the post-game pressers and from watching him on the sidelines during timeouts. It does seem like he's been playing an integral role, and Dambrot's mentioned that he has had a lot of responsibilities, and he's played coy, but it's the message seems pretty clear. He's been preparing Drew for this role since Drew joined the staff. And I think everybody at Duquesne, at least from a fan perspective, is on board with that.
Well,
That's
I mean,
true. I can't say that
they are
because,
now.
right.
I don't know if you would necessarily say that 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's correct. And boy, do I love the satisfaction of they have to eat crow.
100%. Discussion board's been very interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting this week. It's been fun again.
I distinctly remember, I think it was last year on the pod, I did all of the numbers of the coaches since the 70s and showed that Dambrot was already the best coach last year in the middle of a season that he quote unquote needed to turn things around. And now he's finished that season off by getting a 20-win season, and then this year. The journey has been incredible. I mean, truly storybook. I agree with you. Disney needs to buy the rights of this. Maybe the actor who played him in as the high school coaching role, he'll just wait 10 more years and he'll be the college version of him.
They're gonna get Danny DeVito. Just kidding, Keith. Just kidding.
Yeah. Side note: if you don't follow Zach on social media, definitely follow him solely for the Keith Dambrot post alone. And if Keith hasn't seen your current shirt, can't wait for him to pull that move when he does.
What was that? I couldn't hear you.
Oh, I said yeah,
No,
your
no, no. The
shirt's a
shirt
little
was loud.
loud.
The shirt was okay. You never mind. Never mind. Nick.
Sorry for ruining the punchline.
Nick.
But no, I mean, it's truly been crazy that Duquesne has had two of the best coaches for basketball at the same time period. With
And neither have been appreciated anywhere near worth the darn that they should.
No, absolutely not. And we can talk about that on and off the pod, about how much they deserve to be appreciated.
I mean, heck, we don't even know. Dan's contract's up after this year.
Yep, and Dan made it very clear that he does want to be back, and he hopes that
He's made it clear that the ball's in Duquesne's court. He's made sure of that.
That's correct. So speaking of Coy coaching at the press conferences, really appreciated that move as well. So
it was without being TMZ, because that's not my job. It was smart. Now, he admitted after that he misspoke a little bit, but I mean,
right.
I think the message is clear. He wants to remain the voice of this program.
Well, in clarifying that misspeaking, he made it even clearer that the ball
Yes, he did.
in Duquesne's court.
Yes. An unintentional intentional.
So, yeah. No, excited to see hopefully both of the programs continue on with the same coaching staff in its entirety, or as close as possible. It does seem like there's always potential for a few moves here and there, regardless of how stable the program is. I mean, from a tournament perspective, what's your expectations going into this on Thursday? Is it dangerous to have expectations at this point?
Enjoy. I think for Duquesne fans, are going to be so focused on a result, but don't. If you have learned anything in these last 47 years, or since 1977, nothing is promised. Enjoy every second of this experience, whether it ends on Thursday, whether it ends on Saturday, whether it goes all of the way. Enjoy every single second, because it's never promised to happen again. It took the Cubs how many years to win the World Series, Nick? I mean, my point exactly. I mean, don't even have to answer that question. Everybody knows that. I mean, no offense to Duquesne, but they were the bad news bears for the longest time. I mean, they just could not catch a break, and it was always same old Duquesne. Well, yeah, now they are the same old Duquesne that was winning titles, but as Ken Gormley illustrated at the press conference, the new Duquesne, the Dan brought Duquesne, that has found a way to not drop a March Madness Media workroom sign on top of their back like Nick just did. You're welcome. But more so, just a team that has a clear identity, a clear voice again, and a clear passion. And assuming they don't muck this up, a clear direction moving forward as well. And I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. And there's been a lot of peaks and valleys to get there. There's been less player retention than a lot of fans were expecting to get there. And you can blame Keith, you can blame lack of development, or you can just say, look, it wasn't the right fit. It was a miss. In today's climate, people come, people go. What matters is that all of that stuff was necessary to get to Duquesne exactly to where they are right now. And you know what? I mean, was it easy? No, but it's a Pittsburgh team that's dancing, and maybe Pitt fans, instead of bemoaning your team's luck, you cannot rain on the parade of a team that hasn't had a chance to enjoy this as you have almost every single year. Yeah, there have been a couple of down years, namely the Kevin Stallings era. No comment there. No comment needed. But, I mean, yeah, the strength of schedule non-conference was what it was, and the committee decided not to go that route. But that doesn't mean you take it out of the committee. There's still plenty of basketball coming to Pittsburgh. John Calipari coming back home writes itself. I mean, all of my media brethren that are going to be covering that at the Paint Bucket, I'm sure that's going to be a hell of a time, and I hope they have all the fun in the world for it. But for those of us coming to Omaha, that's going to be a a fun time too, with a group of guys that are playing with house money, a why not us mentality, and are used to being the underdog. And this time of year, that takes you very, very far. So, I mean, look no further than the VCU team they just beat. Shaka Smart led them into a Final Four. I mean, the sky's the limit for this Duquesne team. As long as it believes and it sticks to its principles, it can take you far. But if you take your hand off the wheel for 1 second, that margin of error becomes even less. And it's a team that Tristan Freeman said on the Spaces pod with our good old buddies Bluff Blog Johnny and of course David Bourne, just that this team provides some VCU vibes. It plays effectively offensively. It has no problem putting the ball in the basket. So this is a classic can Duquesne defend game. And if they do, and they rise up for the moment and they avoid the lulls, this game's theirs. But if they don't bemoan the fact that it might end. Enjoy the fact that it happened. I mean, 2 weeks ago, everybody was panicked and everybody was calling for Keith to retire already and just go away, and they were ready to give the guy the vaudeville whip. And now look what happened. I mean, for me, seeing the VCU road game that previous week in Richmond when I was in town for A10s told me this team was ready to make this run. It was what I said in the first answer to you, Nick. I mean, taking that time off, yeah, there was spring break, but even still staying behind, preparing mentally as if it was a tournament and treating it like the Atlantic 10 tournament. Keith calling that timeout after he went zone a little bit and it threw VCU off. Then VCU scores 2 baskets. Keith calls timeout immediately. He has not done that at all and immediately makes the adjustment back. And VCU was so perturbed they couldn't recover. And it was in front of a sellout crowd, over, 7,000 VCU fans on their senior night, screaming. The 2 times they really were loud in the second half, Duquesne quieted them right away. And that was the exclamation point of when I knew that this was very not only possible, but was likely going to happen, as long as they believed. And they did. Bracket be damned. It all comes down to heart, belief, and will. And there was no team that had any better than that. And of course, good on Keith for doing the announcement today, because the whispers were only going to continuously get louder. And now with more local media attention, the national media picking you up as a darling, now that noise is something that you're not going to be able to contain. And this was probably the last day for Keith to be able to really do it his way without having all of the literal cameras breathing down his neck. Now, of course, Keith wanted to protect his players, and he told his players this morning. So his players did not know until today that he was retiring. So that moment you saw between Day-Day, Jimmy, and Keith, with everybody saying they loved each other, was a very organic, natural moment. Obviously, they rode that bus ride. They took that ride back to Pittsburgh with Donna, with the administration, so they got to really see everything firsthand, and that's where it gets special. But for all of this to happen, it's just such unprecedented stuff.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to transition from this because we could talk forever about how impactful he has been to the program and how important this NCAA tournament is. But it's getting late. And I did say that I wanted to talk some women's basketball because I know it's not Alex's strength. So transitioning from one great coach to the other, what can we expect from a WNIT? I know they have a bye in the first round and they're hosting the second round. I'm learning. Initially, I didn't even know the WNIT was still around because they created the WBIT. So this is all new to me.
I don't even know what the fuck is going on with these postseason tournaments, Nick. I mean, Miami's supposedly the #1 overall seed in the WBIT, but weren't they suspended and they still got a #1 seed? They missed something with the Cavender twins, I think I remember reading. So then you put somebody that has no business being a #1 seed and just copy paste them instead of the bracket. So WBIT is a clusterfuck. And then you go to the WNIT, and Duquesne, I know, had put in a bid to host a first round game. They get a bye from the first round. Nearly everybody and their mother is getting a first round bye. And then, oh, are we playing Tuesday? Are we playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday? Are we playing at home? Are we playing on the road? Well, if we play this day, Duquesne's hosting at PPG Paints. We don't have a staff. We have to go to the road. But if it's on this game, if it's on this day, then we get to host it. I mean, if you're a player at this point, the fact that you've been just waiting to actually practice and play somebody else, it feels like preseason again. And now there's a legitimate possibility that they have to wait another week. I mean, if you're not irritated, I mean, I was at practice today. There might have been someone that was irritated. He might not be enjoying that irritation until midnight per se. But I mean, there goes Nick's spit take. But I mean, it's so aggravating because you do have to keep an eye on the portal. Every single team does. You're managing this fourth season, third-ish season. I mean, you're managing that. You don't necessarily know who you're playing yet between the two teams that they could be playing. You know it's going to be Buffalo or Monmouth. I mean, the whole thing is interesting. So there's an excitement about playing again, but they didn't even call the coaches to tell them they were in. None of the teams. Technically, I technically broke the news to Bert. I mean, what? This is March? I mean, so they're trying to figure out, are they in? Then it's, who are we playing? How do we scout this? We have to scout them both. When are we playing? Where are we playing? I mean, there's more questions than answers. How far can they go? I mean, they've done it before. They were Road Warriors several years ago. They've talked about it. I know that they have. So they absolutely could go all the way, and they've seen their male counterparts do it. So they absolutely have the belief they can. But I mean, at this point, you have to be stir crazy. Not speaking for them, but you have to be. I mean, you've been waiting for so long, ever since the Richmond loss, and
Yeah,
it's
spring
been
break.
over a week now. They've had an unintentional spring break again, but this time they didn't have to play any games. They just are scrimmaging against each other and or their male practice players. So at this point, they're just ready to move on and just play somebody. And you're just waiting. It's like that phone call that won't stop ringing, even though you're trying to answer it. So I mean, it's frustrating to say the least. But I mean, at this point, you're trying to let players such as Yanni Townsend and Amaya Hamilton, who aren't picking up a basketball again most likely after this, you want them to end it the right way. You want Lauren Wasselson and Precious Johnson, who are pursuing a professional career, to build off of this. All of the players that are returning, which they're expecting everybody to come back, you want them to build off of that. So you want to do it the right way. You want to make a deep run. You want to play until the end of March or into April. But it's so uneven. It's so challenging. But again, this is the tournament they were unable to get in last year. They are able to get into it this year. They do have a bye, so they do get a chance. But again, there's so much craziness where there's the 5 W's and the 1H. It's almost like you don't have any of those answers. So it's a really interesting position to be in. You're glad to be playing, but you just want to know who you're playing, where, and when.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it. They might have to wait a whole another week, so it's 2.5 weeks really in between the A10 tournament game and possibly their next one.
College experience, gotta love it.
So, yeah, this is basically a Christmas break on steroids.
It's mental. It's absolutely mental. I mean, forget the anxiety. It's the mental health at this point. I mean, you just want to play and you can't. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, you just want to be with your team, be with your teammates, and just make that one last run and create those memories that'll last a lifetime. And you're just waiting for a dance partner. You almost want to play the play-in game just so you can play.
Yeah. Yeah, can we choose to be a worse seed, please?
They were ready to host a game. They were ready to put into, every team puts in, the way that tournament works is, and I've seen it from back in the men's basketball days with Pitt way back when, all these tournaments you're paying to host. So, you put your bid in to potentially have the opportunity to host. And, I'm sure that's an opportunity that Duquesne wants, especially with its decorated roster. So I'm sure that they probably put something in for at least the first or second round game, something of that sort. But, with the NCAA tournament, there goes Thursday, there goes Saturday. I mean, so are you going to play on Sunday, or are you going to host? Or are you going to even host on Sunday? Or are you going to host on Monday? Or are you on the road Thursday or Saturday? I don't know. If it's a Buffalo, it might even be on the road. If it's Monmouth, they might have to wait to host. But even then, you're waiting that long. I mean, for me, whether the men win or not or lose, it still might not be my last game, but I don't know. It's a holding pattern. I feel like a meteorologist.
Yeah. And I mean, especially because we mentioned the contract uncertainty with Bert, that's got to be adding to it all too. So I don't know about the assistants contracts, but I'd imagine similar boat for them too. The phrase during the A10 tournament was "burn the ships." It's still got to be a similar feeling right now.
It was not said today in practice. I will say that there were no Viking helmets worn today. However, I think it's the mindset, but I truly think that Dan's done more than enough. And I'm not going to get dramatic because he's asked me not to be, and I'm not going to be. Dan Bird is Duquesne basketball, period, end of sentence. I can't see a future without him in it within this program, at least in the near future. And I think he anticipates being the coach, and I think they'll work something out. I hope they'll work something out. And that's all
Yeah.
I'm going to say on it.
As far as Yanni and Precious and Amaya, they have kind of shared minutes pretty well throughout the season. Do you think that's going to be, the same rotation presumably throughout the tournament, but is there going to be any more difficulty these being confirmed their last games as Duquesne Dukes?
They want to go out the right way. I don't think it'll change rotations. This isn't like the tournament that just got canceled. What was it? I'm trying to go up the chat right now. Forgive me, we're doing this live. The WBI, which just got canceled recently today. So the future of that tournament is in serious doubt. With the WBI, that's a tournament where maybe you play your younger kids and see what you have and try to build something. But this is not that tournament. This is a tournament where Duquesne put bids into both the WBIT and WNIT because they're back to that standard, because they want to end the season the right way and they want to have a good outcome for those players that we just mentioned. Also, Lauren Wasselson as well, who's trying to play professionally after this is all said and done. So, really, there's such opportunity here, and I don't think they're going to play out of character. They'll play within their character, within their means. There won't be anything special over the top. Oh, that was senior day where all the seniors started. So I don't think there's no reason to change course. They're all part of the rotation at this point in time, and they're all big parts of that rotation. So no reason to deviate from that point. But again, they're just waiting to play somebody.
Yeah. No, especially with how competitive I know basically all of them are. This has got to be torturous.
It's Hades. It's absolute Hades. And you could just see the eyes wandering when they're being explained, oh, it could be this team. You have here's the brackets, and you're just okay, now what? We don't know who we're playing. We just want to play somebody. What do they do well? What are we going to do? You're just waiting.
Yeah, it's kind of going back to the NCAA tournament year where the team just focused on themselves, and I guess they did that earlier this year as well. Where they just focused on their game. That's kind of really all you can do at this point, because you don't want to waste time prepping for a team that you might not play, and you also have a decent amount of time in between when you find out that they're going to be playing them too, to prep for that team.
Well, sure. At this point, they're basically just playing against each other. That's the course of the action. You don't want to push too much. You want to keep the legs fresh. You want to keep practices fun. You want to go in and out as quick as possible, especially this time of year. You're approaching 100 practices on the year, so there could be a lot of tired legs. So you want to use this as the chance for the players to enjoy themselves, have some fun, and keep it light, keep it simple, keep it fun, but make it competitive, and finding that balance. And Dan Bird understands that balance very, very well. So, that's pretty much what the point of emphasis is at this point. And when they find out who it is, they'll adjust accordingly.
And looking forward beyond this tournament for them, the expectation that you mentioned is that they keep all the returners. That would be 4 major guard contributors at this point with Nay, Megan, Tess, and Journey. Are there any other additions or players that you see making a jump into getting minutes that are currently on the roster?
Well, I mean, certainly as you go down the roster, you kind of have to take a look at where things are at. I mean, post play is going to, of course, be the question next year. Just who's going to replace that kind of that monster that was kind of in the post, that 3-headed monster. And it's going to be something that's going to have to get addressed, whether it's the incoming players, whether it's someone like Keandra stepping up, whether it's the portal. I mean, these are all possibilities. I'm also anxious to see how someone like a Raimi or someone like a Gabby steps up that showed some promise and has the opportunity to earn some more minutes. I'm anxious to see, now that Journey's developed some confidence, how that continues. Can she establish that jump shot to be more consistent? Because ain't nobody in the conference catching up with her. And I mean, even today in practice, Journey blew by a defender, and Lauren turns over our direction and goes, "Man, she's fast." I mean, you already know it, but just again, just literally turning on the jets, just even now, all these practices later, just has another different gear. I mean, watching her is gonna be take a jump, is gonna, now that she has that confidence, is gonna be so key, and she's gonna threaten to take a starting spot. That's just the fact of the matter. But I mean, a lot of those new players, they firmly believe that Raimi and Gabby are going to be really good players on this team. They don't anticipate losing anybody on this roster outside of the players that are going to depart for graduation. So who's going to challenge? There's a couple of players that could challenge that I've mentioned. And there's also going to be, can any of the freshmen stake a claim? Can, if they bring a portal addition, really you have the guard position pretty much shored up. You have it figured out. So your job is to try to find a post. And you're going to have to try to find a post really good. And that allows Duquesne to be really selective in what it wants and how it's going to fit within the team. And that's only going to benefit this team even more.
Yeah. Now that I was thinking aloud, is there a chance they go super small next year and have Tess play a 4, almost a de facto 4, where it's basically a 4 guards and 1 big lineup like Bears men's team did back in the day?
No,
No, not a
no.
chance.
No reason to. Not in today, where you have your pick of the litter. Everybody does of the transfer portal. Now, the transfer portal is such a divisive place because some people transfer because of the fit, but some people are transferring every year, and you have to wonder, is it a fit issue? Is it this issue, or something in between? And that's where this time of year the coaches really have to rack their brain. Now, it's different for Duquesne, which doesn't really have too much to fill based on the incoming class that's coming in when you look at the numbers. So really that allows them to look for something super specific, and that is going to help them a lot. There's other schools, like a lot of the bottom of the league today has announced a lot of players transferring. Kristen Williams out at UMass, for example. The most interesting one to me was Rhode Island losing Sophie Sene, which wasn't the biggest name in terms of production, but one of Rhode Island's biggest tools is Denny Amadou's French connection, and that's one of the first French players to leave there. Now, you bet your bottom dollar that Tammy Reese is going to be really aggressive, but there were definitely some players that surprised some of the chat groups that I was a part of within the conference fandom. So it's really interesting to see who all leaves and what happens. I mean, LaSalle's lost almost everybody. So are they going to try to move on from Mountain McGillivray, or are they going to keep him with this new arena and, try to build it that way? I mean, Mountain had a chance to build it last year and just, it didn't work out. It just didn't work out. And he was given a bad hand when the 3 Jacob sisters all decided to, move on from the program, and that happens, but it's tough. And now UMass is having to rebuild. St. Louis is also in the WNIT, but they've had a couple players that have transferred as well. So, I mean, you go on down the line, and there's players within each, and the one team that doesn't seem to really be losing anybody right this second among the postseason teams is Duquesne. I mean, there's a lot of the big schools aren't. And you're going to see that with schools that are either expecting turnover with staff or schools that just underperformed and players just wanting something else. I mean, once the clock struck midnight, you already saw two people within. I mean, bless that school's academic advisors for already having the departure notices ready to go. But man, I mean, the transfer portal is more ruthless than ever before. But with those departures come opportunity, but that opportunity has to be the right one, and that's why these next 45 days are so crucial for coaching staffs, because you're in a catch-22. Because if you're looking for maybe a couple pieces, it's because you've had a really successful season, but you're managing this season and your demands this season with trying to be better next season, and you don't necessarily have all the time, money, and energy to vet into it, but you have to find a fit. And if you're a losing team, then there's more point of emphasis to almost completely overhaul, whether by your choice, theirs, or something in between. And you're rushing to put a team together, and that's always not the right recipe sometimes either. So there's a lot of give and take. It's a very challenging time, and it's becoming more challenging with there being more picks. Yeah, you can take your time, but and some players might gamble and lose. But when you're looking for something super specific, it helps because then you can try to make it work and understand everything else. I mean, if you look at Pitt, what's the fate of Pitt going to be? Tory Verdi's promised changes. Is that a change to the staff or changes to the staff? Is that a roster overhaul? What is that going to look like in year two? I mean, I guess we'll find out, because the city game is by proxy. Verdi said it's coming back, and Dan says anytime, any place, anywhere. So you have to think the city game is coming back. You also have to wonder, with the coaching change of Robert Morris, is there any chance the county game comes back? I mean, you have to at least wonder that question to yourself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they just announced their Robert Morris just announced their coach today, Chandler McCabe. So that's not a Biscaglia name. So there's a chance that there's a county game, which would be fantastic for local basketball, but that's with no knowledge on any situation that's going on. That's more so just a look. Sal and Charlie are no longer with the program. That was where the issue supposedly aligned with. So Dan's always said anytime, any place, anywhere. So if it can bring money and notoriety to both teams within the city, then why the heck not? So local women's basketball is booming in a time where the sport's at probably an all-time high interest rate. So it'll be interesting to see what these teams look like between Duquesne's expected continuity, how Robert Morris is going to build this roster back up, and how many players are coming back to Pitt. I mean, they're all very valid questions, and it'll be interesting to see in these next few months what ends up happening.
Yeah. And from all that, it kind of my main thought in transfer portal in general is Duquesne has to be in one of the best spots to recruit players based off of the three bigs that just left. All three of them had 1,000 career points. That is such a huge selling point. And you have guards that want to feed the bigs. It's a balanced attack. I mean, success is there. The hunger to be back in the NCAA tournament is there. The men's team getting into the NCAA tournament, putting the focus onto both basketball teams. There's so many great recruiting pitches there. It's just a matter of finding the right fit, like you said.
I mean, how many times have you bought a size whatever shoe because it's your size and it doesn't fit right? It doesn't feel good on the sides. Maybe it's a little bit wider than you expected. Every shoe fits different. You have to find the shoe that fits you.
Zach, we could keep going forever. I know you've got a busy schedule ahead. It's after midnight already. So Dan's already on to the next day.
Are you sure about that?
That's true. Well, there's not a game coming up that he's aware of. Well, he's aware there's a game, but he can't really prepare for it. So I don't know. Maybe he's enjoying today a little more than midnight.
I would highly doubt that.
Maybe he's on to his next recruiting adventure.
I think Dan's taking a nap.
But always appreciate you taking the time, especially with how busy you are prepping to head out to Nebraska tomorrow? Well, yeah, technically tomorrow.
At
'Cause
this
it's
point,
Tuesday.
technically tomorrow is right. Yes.
So
I still have to work. I still have to work a day, and I have to file. I have to have a nice meeting with Uncle Sam after work tomorrow. So that's always a fun time.
yep, I've got the local Uncle Sam meeting.
All right. Today's episode of Sesame Street is sponsored by the number 1099. Hashtag Zach O's.
Luckily I avoid 1099, W2, 1098, a lot of other numbers out there, but with that, Zach.
You can steal that Sesame Street line, by the way.
All right. And
That was a damn good one. I was proud of that.
Yeah, by the way, did not mean for that to be running you over with a bus on that tweet. Meant to be giving you credit because I thought that was insightful, and I completely missed that until you brought that up about Travis
What
Ford.
that I didn't. Oh, about Travis? No, it's fine. I thought you were saying about the other thing about the Pittsburgh Sports Now, which I'm blessed to be with them. And I have to give them a shout out. And I'm not just saying this as a company line. I mean this from the bottom of my heart. These round trip flight tickets to Omaha are knucking futz. The investment that Pittsburgh Sports Now has placed on Duquesne men's basketball and Duquesne women's basketball this year has been amazing. Other than the Duke, I mean, the Duke has been at every men's and women's game during the school year. We've staffed for every home Duquesne men's game. We've been at probably at the most, us and the Duke have been at the most Duquesne women's games without question. It's basically been just us telling the women's story all season with a couple of cameos in between. So, I mean, credit goes to, you have to give the credit, first of all, the Duke has done a really good job. I have to give Spencer a bunch of props for what he's been able to get out of his staff, and so many of them were able to be at Barclays Center enjoying it. And now, I don't know if combined the three of some of those ages can add up to 47 years, but the story they told did a service for all of those men and women that have been waiting so long for such a long period of time. And hopefully somebody gets to go down to Omaha. Hopefully the university does the right thing and at least helps with some funding to get some student reporter or reporters down there so that they can enjoy this experience. I mean, this might be the only March Madness they ever cover in their entire lives. And for them to have it be a part of this would be extremely amazing. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I know that there's March Madness here in Pittsburgh, and that'd be a fantastic opportunity. But hopefully Spencer or somebody on that Duke staff gets the opportunity through the university either to travel with the team somehow as part of their party, or maybe President Gormley's been known to step up in big ways before. Hopefully between him and Dave Harper and Keith Dambrot, they do the right thing, and there is student representation amongst the media that do make this trip to Omaha. I know it's not the cheapest of trips for a lot of people, and I owe a huge thank you to Pittsburgh Sports Now for this season, but especially on such short notice, being able to go to Omaha. And from the jump in Akron, they texted me before the Akron game asking me, did you want to do the NCAA tournament? This has been a long time coming. You deserve it. They asked me back then, and they were dead serious about going all in with that. And I cannot give them enough credit for doing so. It really says a lot about how much upward the program is ticking. And there's so many talented this is so many different left turns, and I apologize for that, but it's
That's
almost
all right.
12:30. I think it's okay. But so many really, really good people that have been covering this Duquesne team all season long, that have been doing it across the board. And too many to name, but they know who they are, and hopefully people that are watching or listening to this can get a scope and get to read the different coverage. I mean, it's been it's been nice to see this team get covered with so many more beat writers and more interest in the team, and that's only going to go up as this continues. So whether it's Drew, it better be Drew, or somebody else it's gonna be interesting to see how this translates into interest. It's gonna be full press rows possibly again. You might not necessarily have fans of the game that can sit in that corner anymore because that might have to be media overflow. So it's gonna be interesting to see what happens. And by God, my heart, I am so happy for Ray Goss. I'm so happy for Jarrett Dorham. I mean, even the lifers at Duquesne, like the Paul Hightowers, yes, the Dave Sabas. I mean, the Dom Maricos, the Josh Taylors, the Bob Healy's. I mean, the Ron Dicks. There's so many names. The Ed Masarskis.
Mike
There's so many
Skirbo,
names. Mike Skirbo.
Christensen.
There's Rick Christensen. There's so many names and fans that I'm mentioning, and there's so many that I'm leaving out, and I apologize, but there's so many of you that have been waiting for this for such a long time. This is your moment. Enjoy it. And if you can't get to Omaha, hopefully someone will get you some kind of merch that has Duquesne logo. Otherwise, at least hopefully you can get to the game in Pittsburgh and at least get your program, get your shirt so you can remember this for the rest of your lives. And God, I do not want to be the Duquesne bookstore right now. I really don't.
No, they posted a link on Instagram about having A10 championship gear, and the only new gear was NCAA tournament shirts, but not even, it wasn't even like Duquesne focused NCAA. It was just NCAA tournament shirts and then just a bunch of school logos.
It was the
So
Fanatics shirt. Okay, that checks out.
yeah,
I mean, I think it's just a matter of they didn't ship the stuff yet. I mean,
yeah.
I keep checking.
Demand is super high, and
Yard House will
logistics.
probably have it too down the line. I know online they ran out of sizes. They probably only had like 5 or 6 of each size, so it's no wonder. But wow, I mean, even to myself as someone that's numb, it's unbelievable, but it's believable at the exact same time. I mean, a lot of people didn't believe, but I was saying in January that this was still very much a possibility if they could just believe in themselves and cross that finish line. And look where they're at. I mean, it's deserved, it's insane, and it's not done.
No, the story's not over. I do want to give a special shout out, I guess, to NIL for making it possible for fans to possibly help out a person who's undercompensated and contributing, Jake DeMichael, being the walk-on freshman this year. NIL is still possible even when you're not a scholarship player.
Well, and there's one name that we haven't shouted out yet that we absolutely have to shout out, or else I will be so mad at myself for not saying this name. Mr. Tramp Stamp, Johnny the Bluff Blog.
Yeah, I asked him in Spaces. He said that he's not able to get it as a tramp stamp, but he's going to get it on his calf in Akron after the tournament games that he's attending in Omaha. So
Johnny's just been a friend to us all. He's been my friend for a duration. This extremely supportive, very passionate Duquesne fan that has just been there, and it's amazing to see his enthusiasm and the following that he's built on social media. He was in press row for a season too. Let's not forget that. So, I
yeah,
mean,
he
it's been insane to think about, but I mean, Johnny comes to mind. Eric, who sits behind me every game. My friend Clay Groff is there at every game. There's so many people. If I literally did a roll call, we would probably the game would probably be over on Thursday already. But for all of you, again, Jay Walters, again, I've said Ed Masarski. I mean, we're going down the line. I mean, it's just insane. The Ruprecht family, the Cholowinskis. I mean, it's nuts. There's so many names, and I know I'm forgetting a gajillion of you. I'm sorry, but I mean, just know just the impact that you have made in all of this. It's just insane. It's nuts.
yeah, like you said, it's not over yet. We're going to enjoy the ride as long as we can. And I understand you can't join me on this, but I'll say it for both of us. Let's go Dukes.
The Dukes are back and now it's time to rise up. Rise up.